Welcome to Beware Spoilers. I am Adam. I have just seen Moonfall, and that was an experience. Here's the thing about Moonfall. It's not great. Granted, it's like a lot of, Roland Emmerich things in that it's not great. But I think that, there isn't as much disaster porn as you would want. It's like going to see a Godzilla movie and then there's not enough Godzillas or any monster really doing a lot of damage, and you're like, well, I don't give a fuck about the humans. Independence Day had that happy medium, and I think that since Independence Day and The Day After Tomorrow and 2012, there hasn't been another one that he's done that's really hit the same way. I think that there was a better path to be taken, and I feel like, here's the thing about this movie, it feels like it was cannibalized from another script. I listen to a lot of podcasts while I'm at work, because my job is, kind of mindless. But one of the things that I hear, writers talk about is the document, and, no idea, even if it's not used now, is ever really dead. Any idea that you write, if you cut something from a script, if you cut something from a story, save it, because it could have some use at some point in the future. And if it's got some use at some point in the future, it's good to have it this may not have been used here, but I can use it in Project X or whatever other thing coming up. Independence Day Resurgence ends on a note of, kind of hope, where it's they've defeated the new wave of things, and then there's this, the new wave of aliens, and then there's this, other alien species that comes, and they're oh, well, we can use them to take the fight to the aliens, that way they don't come back again. And all that's fine and good, and awesome, and fun, and fine, but Independence Day Resurgence didn't quite set the box office on fire the way that Fox would have liked, and then they just weren't going to make another Independence Day movie after that, in all likelihood. It feels like we have two movies going on here, kind of in a Justice League kind of way, but not really, because it feels like it was two movies that were spliced together early on in the process. The first half of the movie is basically unwatchable. It's just awful. It got to the point where it's we get to them getting ready to go to space to take on the thing, and I genuinely thought that the movie theater had fucked up and had the sound, had the movie at 1.1 times or some other thing, because the dialogue is cut really weird. There's a lot of weird editing choices. There's a real breathless pace to it, and not a good breathless pace. Infinity War has a breathless pace to it. Infinity War has a real breathless pace where it's if we're going to, we're not going to have a break in what's going on. It's just we're going from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And as we keep going, thing to thing to thing to thing, the story gives you small moments to catch your breath and move on, but you're never really given an opportunity to regroup in a real way and come up with a plan to do it. And it works to the movie's benefit in Infinity War. Here, the first half does that, but it doesn't really do anything besides confuse you and make you be oh, so what are these characters' relationships? Scenes, if the average scene length in the first half of the movie is 5 minutes, that's a lot. And that's a problem. Now, if the issue is, if we're getting to the point in the story where, when we get into space, at that point I'm oh, well, the movie's almost over now. And then we get to the second half of the movie, which is where we get into the aliens and all that stuff. And this is where I started to feel parts of the script were taken from the now defunct Independence Day 3 script. Because a lot of the exposition about the aliens, and then the role that, I don't remember the guy's name, but the dollar store James Corden character, the role that character takes on feels kind of like Brett Spinner's character in Independence Day, who it's not Data, but it's the guy who played Data. it feels like that. So at this point, I'm watching this and I'm like, well, this feels like this could have been what was going on all along. And it's like, even like the way that Patrick Wilson's character, again, and this is a big problem with the movie, is if I leave the movie and can't remember anyone's names, you failed at conveying basic information. The only character whose name I remembered was Sonny, and that's because, much like in what was that movie called? Ghostbusters Afterlife, where there was a character who was just called Podcast. I was like, oh, he's the kid who makes the podcast, so I can guarantee they just were like, oh, let's change let's just, do that, not give him a real name. We don't need to do that. Here, it kind of, like, the only reason I remember Sonny is just, it's his son. So I was like, oh, okay. Like, Halle Berry's son, don't know his name. Halle Berry's exchange student, like, nanny, don't remember her name. Michael Peña's character, don't remember his name, besides he owns a Lexus dealership. Also, the product placement in this movie was kind of funny, because, like, I refuse to believe that that NASA is running antivirus for the space program using Kaspersky, which is, like, Best Buy's, like, brand. Like, okay, like, there's suspension of disbelief, and then there's that. Now, going through the whole thing where it's like, when we get to that third act and we're getting to this and we see the way that the designs are for the interior of the moon and, the Dyson sphere and all of that, it's interesting to me that this was what happened. And then when we get to this point, like, the way that the nanites work for the AI that went rogue and killed, like, there's a lot of stuff that happens in the movie. A lot goes on. Like, that could have been a design of something created by the aliens in Independence Day. It's not out there, and it could have been a cloud of some other thing. And that's the other thing. It's like, size is a weird thing. Like, there's a lot of laws of physics things in this movie that you're just kind of like, oh, that doesn't exactly work. Like, that's not... Like, I hate saying, like, that's not real, because, like, none of it's real. It's all bullshit science fiction, closer to science fantasy. But it just kind of feels that. And then, like, the movie ending kind of echoes, or I'm going to say rhymes with, because, Star Wars, it rhymes with the ending of Independence Day, with the sacrifice, and like, when you look at Roland Emmerich's other movies, that's not something that happens every time, where it's like, it's almost designed to echo that. Like, it feels like that was, like, if that's in the script for Independence Day 3, it makes sense, because Independence Day 3 ends with the heroic sacrifice of Randy Quaid, and whose character's name I'm forgetting, and when Jeff Goldblum and Will Smith are leaving the space station, it is an homage to Return of the Jedi, where, the way that Lando escapes the way Lando escapes the Death Star, and let the flames fly out of it, as he flies out of the porthole. The same thing kind of happens at the end of Independence Day, when they escape the incoming explosion from the destruction of the mothership. And then the same thing again happens here. So, really, it feels like the ending is designed to mirror that in a way that feels like it came from Independence Day. And I'm not saying it's necessarily bad. I'm just saying that if you were like me and wanted to see Independence Day 3, you kind of got the gist of it here. And I don't think Independence Day 3 is going to happen. I'm happy to be wrong. I will happily go and see an Independence Day 3. But I don't know. And, like, it's the kind of thing where there was definitely a better way to, like, a lot of the physics stuff about, like, gravity and, like, how the moon works and like, all of that kind of feels very not made up as they went along. No, yeah, made up as they went along, where it's like, you couldn't consult with, I don't know, a physicist or someone who'd be like, hey, here's what would happen and here's how this would work. it feels like a very rudimentary grade school understanding of like the tides and gravity, and like they read a Wikipedia page about a Dyson sphere. I was like, okay, that makes sense, but like the Dyson sphere would have to have other things going with it too, like how to offset it. But then at the same time, the moon has a different mass than anyone anticipated. But like the calculations worked for the original mass, but now for the new mass, it doesn't. It's weird. And it's kind of like, we just kind of push it along. Donald Sutherland is not in the movie nearly as much as I hoped he would be. And that's a disappointment. And kind of weird as well, where it's like, that's a pretty big casting decision to have him in one scene and then him be like, well, I go put a bullet in my head, see you later. And that's the end of his character. Like, literally, it's like, his send-off is like, I'll kill myself now, goodbye, and it's just kind of weird. I would have liked to see a little bit more of, like, the falling action of what happened, what does this new world look like? Like, someone take command and be like, hey, this is what we're doing, this is what's happening, like, this is what's, like, yeah, we survived, and it's like, yeah, it's cool, we have this cool, like, shot of, like, the top of the Chrysler building sitting there, but it just kind of feels weird. As did the decision to destroy almost the entire New York City skyline, except for the Freedom Tower, which felt like an intentional decision. It feels really weird when you see that scene, you're like, oh, so every other iconography is destroyed except for the Freedom Tower, for obvious reasons, but it just kind of still doesn't quite fit right. It's just, it's one of those things where decisions were definitely made, but the thing is, it's like, this movie doesn't have its, and even, like, there was no sacrifice in Geostorm, even. I don't know, I feel like there was definitely another movie to be, like, it feels like he got told they will never make Independence Day 3, so he took the parts of Independence Day 3 he liked, and kind of built a movie around that, changed a few things slightly, and we're like, look, we'll just use some of the same designs. Because, like, when you get to that third act, keep in mind that orb thing that was in Independence Day Resurgence, that weird orb thing that Brett Spinner is, friends with. That's from the alien civilization that the evil aliens are coming to try and kill, or I forget the exact, plot thing with Independence Day Resurgence, but that is, like, keep that in mind when you watch this movie, because it all kind of feels like it's just not recycled, because recycled implies that it came from another movie that we have seen, but it feels like it was lifted from that script and then reappropriated for a new use, and not necessarily a bad thing, but or I don't even want to call it lazy, but the problem is everything else around it doesn't quite fit, and I'll probably have to watch this movie and both Independence Day movies, again, and you can probably create a composite of, like, well, here's who each person is from the Independence Day movies, and then you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Because it feels like that's the entire first half feels like. It's like we have to, when we get to the second half of the movie, everything is taking its time in such a way that it kind of meshes well. And it works and flows and it feels normal. The first half is so rushed and disjointed and all of that they kind of just like, here's a character archetype. Here is the son who is the fuck up, and the son who doesn't like him, and, by the end, the son will come to love him, and all of that. Here is, like, this, and here is the scientist, and here is, the guy who knows the truth, but doesn't really, and it's like, and here is, the government person, and here is this person, and it's like, it all kind of feels like it's designed to mesh together, just to get to the third act and introduce all those characters, so when we get to the third act kind of works a little bit. But there's a lot of weird narrative groundwork, and there were a few times in the movie too, and especially in the first half, where you get to weird points where there is no, like, what's what I'm looking for here? The score doesn't line up either tonally or volume-wise with the scene going on, and you can tell it's just poor sound mixing for that scene. because this motherfucker has had his directional on for like a half mile now. It's just, it doesn't mesh with what's going on, and that creates kind of a distracting dissonance. There are a lot of times where the sound mixing is a little off. Maybe it was just my theater, but the sound mixing is definitely a problem with this movie, and it's one of those technical things that it's like whenever you see the technical awards, the Academy Awards, it's like, you know, these are people who are unsung heroes, because if they don't do their job right, it's noticeable, and if they do their job right, you will never, you know, call them out by name. Here's an opportunity where someone fucked up, and it's noticeable, and there is a lot of sound mixing, you know, mistakes early on in this movie. I wouldn't recommend watching this movie in theaters. It's definitely going to be on, you know, some streamer. It's Lionsgate, so probably Amazon, because I think Amazon's where the Lionsgate shit ends up. But I can't recommend you go and see it in theaters. It's not worth, you know, getting sick or watching it or anything like that. I don't know. So we'll wrap up there for today. We will be back tomorrow morning with Peacemaker, and then we have no movie tomorrow. Saturday we have Who We Are, A Chronicle of Racism in America, the documentary. So that will be coming, and I think that's it. But yeah, Moonfall, I don't know, solid 5 out of 10. I don't usually give number ratings, but yeah, I feel like this is a missed opportunity all around, with, like, you know, just things not working properly, and just kind of not flowing. Like, there's a certain lack of narrative flow in this movie, but that's it. So until tomorrow morning when we do Peacemaker, and Saturday when we do, what was the other one? Who We Are, A Chronicle of Racism in America. Have a great rest of your week.